Hare Krishna, we will begin with the pranam mantras. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatam Aham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varshaganavi Devi Daitaya Kripabde Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhuri Ujjvala Premadhya Sri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Sakti Vigrahaya Namastute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasiddhanta Dvantaharine Nama Gaura Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Prasambode Padambojayate Namaha Namo Sakti Nodaya Satchidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Sarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaur Birbha Bhumistam Nirdista Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarva Bhoma Shri Shri Jagannathayate Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurtuse Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Sarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhaktasaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Jayadam Suratopango Madmamandir Matirgati Matsarva Sapadambojo Shri Radha Madan Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Skalpadrumadha Srimad Ratnagar Simhasanastitau Srimad Radha Shilu Indadevo Prashtali Sevyamana Smarami Shriman Rasarasarambir Vamsi Vata Tatastida Karsanvenu Swanir Gopi Gopinata Yashriyasana Tapta Konchana Gaurangi Radhe Vindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridiyantasto hi abhadrani vidunoti shrishutam Nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavatam sevaya Bhagavati uttama slokir bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Hare Krishna and welcome back. So we are continuing our discussion in Srimad Bhagavatam. Basically we are discussing chapter number 30, right? And we are discussing the section where Narada Muni is shattering the lamentation and doubts and illusion which has captured Maharaj Yudhishthir's mind. So as we saw last time, that Narada Muni is trying to instruct Maharaj Yudhishthir to say that, he is trying to dispel actually his doubt philosophically and instruct him through series of verses from verse 41 onwards, he's saying that everyone is under Lord's control. So why Yudhishthira is lamenting? Because his two uncles and his aunt, they are not visible in Hastinapur. They have left of Hastinapur. So he is really worried about them. What really happened to these great souls? So at that point, Narad Muni comes and he dispels his doubt. So in verse number 41, he is saying that everyone is under the Lord's control. So whatever is happening by Lord's will. So do not worry. He is a leader of all, and he brings all the living entity together and disperses them. So do not lament. That is his first instruction. And then he says that as the cows are bound up by rope, this is an example which is given. Similarly, humans are bound up by the Vedic injunctions, which are actually the orders of the Supreme Lord, which are created by the Supreme Lord. And then he gives another example as a player sets up and disperses playthings by his own sweet will. Similarly, the Lord brings men together and separates them by his supreme will. So there is no need of lamentation, because this is happening by the will of the Lord. That is the whole point. And then he explains in verse number 44 that lamentation in separation, that lamentation of feeling of separation happens in conditioned life, and that is only because of the illusory affection. So he is telling that he is having an illusory affection, which is on the basis of the bodily connections, not on the platform of soul. So that is a reason of lamentation. And then he says you give up your anxiety which is due to ignorance. So the ignorance was that Maharaj Yudhishthira was thinking that his uncles were old, uncle and aunt were very old, so they are dependent on him. So that was the ignorance. So, and because of that ignorance and the knowledge of the Lord, of course, we can for sure know that Maharaj Yudhishthira is not somebody who is bereft of knowledge. He is a person with whom Krishna personally associates. So this is to teach us. So all these things, the pastime that happens is for teaching all of us. So he says that give up your anxiety which is due to ignorance. You are now thinking of how means your relatives are helpless and poor creatures, will exist without you. How will they exist without me? So this is somebody on whom somebody is depending. When they are depending on the person, then they start thinking like that. And there is anxiety in their mind. So that anxiety is because of the ignorance. And then Maharaj Yudhishthira has been told by Narad Muni, then how can one protect others? How can we protect others when we ourselves are in the jaws of a serpent? And that is, the body is under the control of Kala or time, karma, action and gunas. So when we ourselves are under the clutches of all these three things, these three factors are the factors by which Lord actually controls us. So all of us are in the jaws of a serpent, and we think that we are protecting others or we are taking care of others, and everybody is dependent on us. So all these thoughts are coming in our mind. But here Narad Muni dispels his doubts. That's why this is the heading of this particular section is Narad Muni shatters Yudhishthira's lamentation and illusion. So all of us will also go through this kind of things. When we go through this, we understand what Narad Muni taught, or at least be prepared to go through these sections again and dispel our doubt through intelligence. So therefore Narad Muni is telling you, how can somebody protect others? Because that person who is trying to protect others, he himself is in the clutches or is in the jaws of the serpent. So therefore basically we cannot protect. Right? And then he gives the next verse, which is talking about how there is a dependence of one living entity on the other living entity. That is a food chain. So one living entity is natural food for another. That is a law of existence. Ahastani sahastanam apadani chatuspadam falguni tatra mahatam jivo jivatsa jivanam. Handless are prey for those who are having hands. Those devoid of legs are prey for the four-legged. The weak are the sustenance of the strong, and one living being is food for another. So jivo jivatsa jivanam. If one living has to live in this world, he has to depend on another living entity. He cannot depend on his sustenance on artificial things. The natural food and all these things are required. So this is the food chain basically. Jivo jivatsa jivanam. You have to kill in order to live. Therefore, Narad Muni says on verse number 48 that focus only on Supreme Lord. So focus your consciousness only on Supreme Lord, because the other things, the kala, the karma, the etc., the gunas, these are beyond our control. So focus only on the right things, avoid all the distractions. So focus only on the Supreme Lord, who is one without the second, who manifests himself by different energies, kala, karma, guna, etc. And who is both within means within our heart as Paramatma and without as Guru. So that is 48th verse. And then today we are going to understand or discuss verse number 49. That is, understand his mission. So try to understand the mission of the Lord and then patiently follow his plan. That is verse number 50. So this is a beautiful series of verses. And in fact, this entire chapter has been so important that it gives us, or it tells us the importance of associating with sadhus. So sadhu sangha is such an important thing in our life. We see that in life of Dhrtarastra, Vidura came as the sadhu to protect him, though he was his brother, but he was in the pilgrimage, which is discussed in the beginning of the chapter. He was in the pilgrimage, and then after hearing the instructions from Maitreya Rishi, then he comes back and he wants to protect his brother. So basically he wants to save his brother. So that's the only reasons he comes back. Then he convinces his brother, and then they all live. And now we are in the section where Narad Muni comes and explains. So this is a very short instruction of Narad Muni, but extremely powerful. So all these instructions help us to detach ourselves from the illusion in which we are. So this is illusion and lamentation. Because of the illusion, we actually lament. So Narad Muni actually dispels this illusion, and gradually the lamentation will go away. Okay. So verse number 49 is to understand his mission. Try to understand the mission of the Lord. So let's read the verses. Okay. 49. Soyam adya maharaja bhagavan bhuta bhavanah kala rupa avritano syam abhavya sura disham dvisam. That Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is the guise of all devouring time. That Supreme Personality of God, Lord Sri Krishna, in the guise of all devouring time, Kala Rupa, has now descended on the earth to eliminate the envious from the world. So that is actually the mission or the purpose for Lord's arrival. Right? Understand his mission. What is his mission? So he is actually the Supreme Lord, but he has arrived here in terms of the all-devouring time, Kala Rupa, to actually destroy the demons. That was the purpose of Lord Krishna. Paritranaya sadhuna vinasaya cha duskrita. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying that these are the two important verses in which Krishna says that BG 4.7 यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत भृत्यानाम् अधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्. This is 4.7. That whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and predominant rise in religion, at that time I descend myself. So after descending, then what Krishna is doing? So that is discussed in the next verse. Paritranaya sadhuna. Paritranaya sadhuna vinasaya cha duskrita. So first part is paritranaya sadhuna and second is vinasaya cha duskrita. So to deliver the pious, so he is more concerned about delivering the pious and then to annihilate the miscreants, and as well as to re-establish the principles of religion. I myself appear millennium after millennium. So these are the purposes of the mission of the Lord when he comes. Now when he comes, he destroys in the Kala Rupa. That is what is discussed in this verse. It's a devouring time. It's a Kala Rupa. He eliminates all the envious. So Prabhupada very rightly puts right in the beginning of the purport that there are two categories of men. One is Suras and the second category of men is Asuras. Thus, there are two classes of human beings, namely the envious and the obedient. So envious are Asura and the obedients are the Suras. Since the Supreme Personality of Supreme Lord is one and the father of all living beings, the envious living beings are also his sons, but they are known as Asuras. So both are actually sons of the Supreme Lord. One category of son is not following the instructions of the Lord, so they are Asuras, but the living beings who are obedient to the Supreme Father are called as Devatas or demigods, or they are also Suras, because they are not contaminated by the material conception of life. So they understand the real purpose or the goal of life. They are not contaminated. Not only are the Asuras envious of the Lord in even denying the existence of the Lord, but they are also envious of all other living beings. Excuse me. So not only they are envious of the Lord, but they are also envious of the living beings around them. So if we are envious of the Lord, naturally we'll be envious of anything that is connected with the Lord. Therefore these people are envious of all living beings. The predominance of the Asuras in this world is occasionally rectified by the Lord when he eliminates them from the world and establishes the rule of a Devatas like the Pandavas. So this was the purpose, Dharma Samstarpanathaya, which we discussed in this verse number 4.8. So for this purpose, these are three purposes: Paritranaya sadhunam, Vinasaya cha duskritam, and Dharma Samspartanathaya. Sampanna is Hindi is called Sampanna. So Stapana also there is a word. So to re-establish Arthaya, for that purpose the Lord is coming to this world and performing all these acts. Kala Rupa. His designation as Kala in disguise is significant. He is not at all dangerous, but he is the transcendental form of the eternity, knowledge and bliss. For the devotees, his factual form is disclosed, and for the non-devotee he appears like a Kala Rupa, which is his causal form. Right. So during the creation, when the creation happens, the Kala, the time, is created by the Lord Himself. And that form is actually the governing principle of this universe. So it is very subtle, but this Kala is acting very subtly and very gradually. And it destroys everything gradually, very slowly. This causal form of the Lord is not at all pleasing to the Asuras, and therefore they think that the Lord is formless in order to feel secure that they will not be vanquished by the Lord. So this is like called as self-deception. Self-deception means we are deceiving ourselves by thinking, okay, this is not going to happen to me. So there is some concept called as smasana vairagya. So whenever somebody goes to smasana, at that time that person sees what is happening in front of him. Either some friends or some relatives have passed away, and that when we see that, then there is a detachment that happens temporarily in the heart. So that vairagya is called as smasana vairagya. So in order to overcome those kind of things, people try to deceive themselves by thinking, okay, this kind of things happen to my friends or my relatives, but it is not going to happen to me. So Yudhishthira Maharaj was asked many questions, and there's a discussion between Yudhishthira Maharaj, and one should read it actually. There's a series of questions, very interesting questions, and very nice answers given by Yudhishthira Maharaj to Yaksha. So one of the question was, what is the most amazing thing in this world? What is the most amazing thing? And I'm sure you must be knowing about this. And Yudhishthira Maharaj answered or replied that the most amazing thing is ahani ahani bhutani, means we see that living around entities around us, they are dying. We see that all the time. But the rest of the people who are not dead yet, they think that this is not going to happen to me. And then Maharaj Yudhishthira says, what could be more astonishing than this? Or what it can be more amazing than that? So this is what these Asuras, they think that the Lord is formless, and if his only form can take my life. But in order to feel themselves secure, they actually deceive themselves. And by a time will definitely come when they will be actually vanquished. So this is going to happen, but they think, okay, it's not going to happen to me. So the next verse number 50, and in the verse number 50, the 49, actually we saw that the mission of the Lord. What is the mission of the Lord? That has been explained, right? And then after understanding his mission, then he's saying patiently follow his plan. So after you understood his mission, now you follow his plan. So what is the Lord's plan? That is here given in the verse number 50. Nishpaditam deva krityam avashayasam pratikshate tavad yuvam avekshadhvam bhaved yavad ishvaraha. The Lord has already performed his duties to help the demigod, and he is awaiting rest. So you Pandava may wait as long as the Lord is here on the earth. So stay here. You understood the purpose. So as long as the Lord is here, you stay on the earth. Okay, so that's what is Narada Muni telling. So the Lord of purpose, Prabhupada says that the purpose of the Lord's descent in the first paragraph, that Lord descends from his abode, Krishna Loka, the topmost planet in the spiritual sky, in order to help the demigod administrator of this material world when they are greatly vexed by the Asuras, who are envious not only of the Lord but also of his devotees. So that was the purpose, which was also explained in the previous verse. But in this world there are imitation gods. Everybody is trying to become God. God means controller, Ishvaraha. So here the term is Ishvara is for the Supreme Lord, but there are small Ishvaraha. There are small Ishvara, and they want to enact as the Lord themselves. So that's why I referred here as imitation God. So Prabhupada is explaining the imitation God. So we all are actually trying to do that. So the Ishvara mentality is trying to be proprietor of everything, right? In order to be enjoyer, ultimately it's enjoyer. So in order to be enjoyer, you need to control things. So you have to be controller. In order to be controller, what do we control? Then we have to own something to control. So we want to become proprietor. So proprietor, controller, and enjoyer. Ultimately, it is enjoying tendency. Anandamaya Abhyasa. The living entity wants to enjoy in this world. So it is increasing its dominion to enjoy. As referred to above, the conditioned living being contacts material association by their own choice. So this is our choice. We are in the spiritual world, but by our own choice, we want to enjoy. Therefore, we want to come to an area where we can enjoy separately. Dictated by the strong desire to lord it over the resources of the material world and become imitation lord of all they survey. So therefore, we see the tendency, somebody who has little money. So initially, we don't have money, then we walk. Then we see somebody has a cycle. And then we see that person has cycle with desire. Okay, I should have one day cycle. Then over the period of time, earn some money and buy a cycle. And while riding the cycle, he finds it's very difficult to ride because there's a lot of work. Only if I have a scooter, I will be happy. So then he works really hard and gets the scooter. But as soon as he gets the scooter, then he finds there is also trouble, going in scooter. There could be accidents, there's a lot of wind, and when there's a rain, it is trouble. So then I should have a car. So then, work really hard to get a car. Then he gets a car. Then he wants something bigger car. And then he wants to have multiple car. And then finally he wants to have an airplane. And this keeps on growing. Right? This never-ending desire. Right? So this is what is happening. So he wants to be the lord of all they survey. Everyone is trying to become an imitation God. There is a keen competition among such imitation God, and such competitors are generally known as asuras. So this is the real competition in this material world. Becoming lord of what we survey. When there are too many asuras in the world, then it becomes a hell for those who are devotees of the Lord. Very nicely put by Srila Prabhupada. Due to the growth of the asuras, the mass of people who are generally devoted to the Lord by nature and the pure devotees of the Lord, including the demigods in the higher planets, pray to the Lord for relief. And the Lord either descends personally from his abode or deputes someone of his devotees to remodel the fallen condition of human society or even animal society. So it's not just in human society, but the Lord also descends in animal society. We saw this in the previous chapters also, where in one of the purports Srila Prabhupada explains this. Such disruptions takes place not only in human society but also among the animals, birds and other living beings, including the demigods in the higher planets. So this happens everywhere in this material world. Brahma Bhurvana Loka. From the lower planetary system to the upper planetary system, from any kind of, whether it's humans, animals, birds, insects, there is two categories of beings. And to protect the good category of people, or the devotee category of people, then the Lord either he comes himself or he sends his representative to fix the situation. Imitation gods are encouraged by the Lord. Lord Krishna descends personally to vanquish asuras like Kamsa, Jarasandha and Sisupala. And during his reign of Maharaj Yudhishthira, almost all the asuras were killed by the Lord. Now he was awaiting the annihilation of his own dynasty, called as Yaduvamsha, who appeared by his will in this world. So Yaduvamshas were also part of Krishna's team, and they were very powerful. So Krishna wanted to make this powerful personalities to go away or leave this planet before he himself leaves. So therefore he devises a plan which is all discussed in the 11th canto. Actually also discussed in the 3rd canto, and I think I think in 3rd canto somewhere it's discussed, 3rd or 4th canto, how the Lord plans, and then all the series of event happens and then the Lord himself, he also lives. So he wanted to take them away before his own departure to his eternal abode. Narada, like Vidura, did not disclose this imminent annihilation of the Yadu dynasty, but indirectly gave a hint to king that his brothers to wait till the incident happened and the Lord departed. So this is going to happen, that the Lord is going to live, and like the Yadu dynasty has already left, so that is not been discussed by Narad Muni to Maharaj Yudhishthira, but he is just giving a hint. So therefore he is telling Maharaj Yudhishthira that patiently follow his plan. So his plan is that he has completed his duties to help the demigods, and now he awaits that whatever remains, annihilation of the Yadus, and then after that you Pandavas wait as long as he is here on the earth, and then you can live. So this is what is explained by Narada Muni. So in the next section it is said 51 to 60 that Narada Muni reveals the future movement of Dhrtarastra and Gandhari and Vidura. So he has given his instruction, and after dispelling of the doubts, now he is going to tell that what has happened or what is going to happen to Dhrtarastra, Gandhari and Vidura. So this, if he is telling that to Yudhishthira Maharaj, then his anxiety will come down. So in verse 51 and 52 he is talking about the place where his uncles have gone. So let's read verse number 51. So 51 is Dhrtarastra saha Bharata Gandharyascha Swabharya Dakshinena Himavata Rishinam Ashramam Gataha. O king, your uncle Dhrtarastra, his brother Vidura and his wife Gandhari have gone to the southern side of the Himalaya mountains, where there are shelters of great sages. So here we see in the pictures they have gone to the Himalayan mountains, so southern side of the Himalayan mountains. So we know where, if you see the map of India, we know where the Himalayan mountain is. So they have gone to the southern side of the Himalayan mountain. So after going there, what are they going to do? So that is what Narad Muni is going to explain. So this is a nice painting done by some devotee, and we can see the southern side of Himalayan mountain, and this is Dhrtarastra, this is Gandhari, and this is Vidura. So to pacify the mourning Maharaj Yudhishthira, Narada first spoke from the philosophical point of view. So this is the section which we have already seen. And then he began to describe the future movements of his uncle, which he could see by his foreseeing power, and thus began to describe as follows. So Narada was a Trikalagya, means he can see past, present and future. So by that power he could see that what is going to happen in the future. So that is, he is explaining to Maharaj Yudhishthira. Shroto bhi sapta bir yavai swardhuni sapta dva vyadat saptanam pritaye nana sapta srota prachaksate. The place is called as Saptasrota, or divided by 7, because there the water of the sacred Ganges were divided into 7 branches. This was done for the satisfaction of 7 great rishis. So this river, the sacred Ganges, was actually divided into 7 branches over there, and this was done for the satisfaction of great rishis. So today onwards we'll also look into the Sarartha Darsani Tika. This is given by, there is a translation, actually that book is, so this is a book, Sarartha Darshani. This is the Srimad Bhagavatam commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and it is translated by His Holiness Bhavani Swami Maharaj. So some of the commentaries, some of the things are different and some additions of information you will find over here. So therefore, wherever if I see the differences, I'll actually start referring to Sarartha Darsani Trika also, wherever, in whichever verses there these differences are there. So here, so 1:13:52, that verse which we are reading here, it is said that which is famous as Ganga, Swardhoni, made herself into 7 Saptada. Why? She did it to please the 7 sages. That place called by the name as Saptasrota or Marichi Ganga. So that is what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is explaining here. So let's go back to verse number 53. Snatvanu swanam tasmin hutva chagnin yatha vidhi abhaksha upa santatma sa ashta vigata ishanaha. On the banks of Saptasrota, Dhrtarastra is now engaged in beginning Ashtanga Yoga by bathing 3 times daily, in the morning, noon and evening, by performing the Agnihotra sacrifice with fire and by drinking only water. This helps one control the mind and the senses and frees one completely from the thoughts of familial affection. So this familial affection is a detrimental thing in progress of any yoga system. So attachment to familial affection is an attachment to the family members, because if we are attachment to something in this world, it is very hard to attach to something supreme, so Supreme Lord. But when we dovetail that attachment and we attach to the Lord and see everything in connection with the Lord, whatever is there in the world is being connected with the Lord and is used in service of the Lord. So that is also a kind of detachment. So we just don't give it up, but we use things in service of the Lord, because this is given by the Lord himself. So that also is a detachment, but that's a higher form of detachment. You are using the things in service of the Lord. Whatever has been provided to us, we engage those things in the service of the Lord. So the Ashtanga Yoga system, here we see that that Dhrtarastra is going to practice the Ashtanga Yoga process. So therefore, this is what is described. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about Ashtanga Yoga system. So in Bhagavad Gita, this system of Ashtanga Yoga is discussed in chapter number 6 of Bhagavad Gita, where series of verses are there. And so let's see. It's not typing. 6.1. Okay. So this is Dhyana Yoga, or it's Ashtanga Yoga system. So in this chapter, it is explained from verse number 11 and 12. To practice this yoga, one should go to the secluded place, right? And should lay kusa grass on the ground and then cover it with the deerskin and the soft cloth. The seat should neither be too high nor too low and should be situated in the sacred place. The yogi should then sit in a very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses and activities and fixing the mind on one point. Okay, and then all these further descriptions are given how to practice this system. So Krishna discusses this in Bhagavad Gita but very briefly, right? And Dhrtarastra is going to perform the same, actually he is going to perform this same yoga process system which is been discussed in this Bhagavad Gita. So let's read over here. The yoga system is a mechanical way to control the senses and the mind and divert them from matter to spirit. Right? It's a mechanical process, and the idea is to divert our attention which is there on the matter. Basically, divert the attention from matter to spirit means divert our attachment, the attachment of the mind which is towards the matter, then moving that to spirit soul. So therefore, if you want to do that, then in this mechanical way of doing things means you have to first of all, you have to disconnect yourself. Therefore, you are disconnecting yourself by going to a remote place. So Ashtangaya means there are 8 angas. Ashta anga. So out of that, first 2 is yama niyama, then asana, then pranayam, then comes the pratyahar. So pratyahar means you have to give up the worldly things. So in pratyahar we have to gradually give up worldly things. Then you have to start giving up the worldly association. So you have to go to a secluded place to do that. And therefore it is not very easy in this day and age. That's what Prabhupada is going to conclude over here. He is going to say that the preliminary process are sitting in a posture, meditation, spiritual thoughts, manipulation of air passing within the body. So this is pranayam. Okay, and gradual situation in trance. So this is dhyan. So these are the last 3 here: dhyana, dharana and samadhi. Out of that 8, after pratyahara, then dhyana. So dhyana means you are focusing on one thing. Dharana means that becomes more intense, and then samadhi is you are having full attention. So coming back to this gradual situation in trance, facing the absolute person, Paramatma. Then such mechanical ways of rising to the spiritual platform prescribe some regulative principles of. So when you are practicing this Ashtanga Yoga process, then you have to follow certain regulative principles. So what are those regulative principles? Principle of taking bath daily 3 times, fasting as far as possible, means eating very minimal, sitting and concentrating the mind on spiritual matters and thus gradually becoming free from Vishaya or material objectives. So the whole idea is to gradually become free from Vishaya. So Krishna says, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinam. So let's see that verse. Vishaya vinivartante. What is that verse? Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehina rasovarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. So this is Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse number 59. So in this, Prabhupada is Krishna is saying that the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment. Right? So this restriction is at 2 levels. right? One is at the superficial level of external things, and then other is at the level of the desires. So the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment to the taste for the taste for the sense object remains. So this restriction is level number 1. It means you externally cut off. So the pratyahara stage is you externally cutting it off, right? But if you cut it off and you do not associate or connect it with something else, so that taste is there in the mind. So therefore Krishna is saying, oh, though the taste for the sense object remains, so in the heart or in the mind this taste is still there, though externally we might have being restricting ourselves. So for the bhakta yogis, for us, what is Krishna's solution? Krishna is saying that, but ceasing such engagement by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So if we have a higher taste, then this ceasing or giving up such lower taste automatically happens, right? So here this development of this higher taste is the process of bhakti yoga, where you are engaging yourself, all the senses, in the service of the Lord. And when we do our services in that consciousness that we are doing the service to please the Lord, then actually we'll experience the higher taste, because we are trying to please Krishna. The services can be done with different modes. One of the mode is I'm doing the service that to show people that I'm doing service. So these are the initially we are trapped by the Maya and we do all this kind of things. But in the higher level, when we do the service only to please Krishna, nothing else, we don't want any benefit from doing the services. The only benefit we want is to please Krishna. So when we want to please Krishna, then Krishna also wants to please us. So he releases that taste. So therefore, we have to be always, our motive has to be always pure in performing the service. So, but ceasing such engagement by experiencing a higher taste, when we do the service, the motive is to please Krishna. Then we experience a higher taste, then what happens? He is fixed in consciousness. All this lower taste will go away, automatically go away. So material existence means to be absorbed in the material objectives, which is simply illusory. So for us, this material, we are there in the material world, we are surrounded by the matter and combination of matter and spirit, which are the living entities. So in our case, we don't have to give up the things, but what we have to do is simply connect that things with Krishna. So basically you have to remove the material objectives and focus on the spiritual objectives. So if our focus is material objectives, it is illusory. So example Prabhupada is giving: house, country, family, society, children, property and business are some of the material coverings of the spirit, Atma, and the yoga system helps one to become free from all these illusory thoughts and gradually turn towards the absolute person, the Paramatma. So the yoga system helps us to focus on Paramatma. By material association and education, we learn simply to concentrate on flimsy things. But yoga is the process of forgetting them altogether. So yoga is not just physical exercise, it is a part of the yoga, one yanga of the yoga. But the ultimate goal is to connect with the Supreme. The modern so-called yogis and yoga system manifest some magical face, and ignorant persons are attracted by such false things, or they accept the yoga system as a cheap healing process for disease of gross body. That's what is going on around us. But factually, the yoga system is the process of learning to forget what we have acquired throughout the struggle of existence. And very nice line. So factually, the yoga process is to actually forget the things, not get entangled into those things around us. So these things around us are they are acquired during our struggle of existence. Right? So trying to lord over the things, we collect many things, and the yoga system help us forget all these collections which we have. Dhritarashtra's enlightenment. Dhritarashtra was all along engaged in improving the family affairs by raising the standard of living of his sons, or by usurping the property of the Pandavas for the sake of his own sons. So that's what Dhritarashtra was doing. So it is not only Dhritarashtra, we are also doing the same thing. We are also trying to collect as much as we can. These are common affairs for man, grossly materialistic and without knowledge of spiritual forces. He does not see how they can drag one from heaven to hell. By the grace of his younger brother Vidura, Dhritarashtra was enlightened and could see his grossly illusory engagement, and by such enlightenment he was able to leave home for spiritual realization. Now, we are not advised to do that. We are advised to use what we have in service of Krishna, because we can only renounce which is ours, but whatever is there in this world is not ours. It's actually energy of Krishna, and it can certainly be used in service of Krishna. So for devotees, even if they have all these collections, they can be used in service of Krishna. That is a detachment for us. It is a natural way of detaching. Sri Narada Dev was just foretelling the way of his spiritual progress in a place which was sanctified by the flow of celestial Ganges. Drinking only water without solid food is also considered fasting. Excuse me. So, now we have these different terms: water fasting, juice fasting, this fasting, that fasting. So in Vedic terms also they were fasting, the conception of fasting was there, but the purpose of those fasting is different. So here Prabhupada says that drinking only water without solid food is also considered as fasting, is one form of fasting. This is necessary for advancement of spiritual knowledge. A foolish man wants to be a cheap yogi without observance of regulative principles. So along with this samadhi, dhyan, dharana, samadhi, which are the later stages, these are the regulative things which one has to be prepared to do those dhyan, dharana, samadhi. So then they have to follow these regulative principles. So similarly for us devotees in Krishna consciousness, we have the regulative principles which we have to follow. So in order to progress spiritually, a man who has no control over the tongue at first can hardly become a yogi. Yogi and bogi are two opposite terms. The bogi, or the merry man who eats and drinks, cannot be a yogi, for a yogi is never allowed to eat or drink unrestrictedly. So therefore in 6th chapter we see that Krishna is talking about things, chapter number 6, verse number 17, no, 16 and 17. So verse number 16 says, there is no possibility of one becoming yogi, O Arjuna, if he eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. And then in 17th verse is saying, he who is regulated in the habit of eating, sleeping, recreation and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. So these are very nice verse explaining us the rules and regulations. Not eating too much, not sleeping too much and all this, right? So it's also be in the regulated state, like eating, sleeping, recreation and work. So these are the lifetimes of practice. It doesn't happen overnight. So we need certain amount of sleep. So we cannot like suddenly say, okay, I'm just going to sleep like for 4 hours or so, like that. So if that is sleeping too little. then we will not be able to focus. Or when we sleep more than that, and more than certain number of hours, then that is also not good for us. A man who has no control over the first part is a man who has no control over the tongue at first can hardly become a yogi. A yogi and bogi are two opposite terms. The bogi, or the merry man who eats or drinks, cannot be a yogi, for a yogi is never allowed to eat or drink unrestrictedly. We may note, without profit, how Dhrtarastra began his yoga system by drinking water only and sitting calmly in a place with spiritual atmosphere, deeply absorbed in the thoughts of Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead. So here we see that he is actually focusing on Lord Hari, and he's following what has been prescribed by his brother. So he has become a serious devotee now. Next verse. Jitasano jitasvaha swasaha pratyahara sad indriya hari bhavanaya dvasta raja sattvatamo malaha. One who has controlled the sitting posture, the yogic asanas, and the breathing process, can turn the senses towards the absolute personality of Godhead and thus become immune to the contaminations of the modes of material nature, namely mundane goodness, passion, and ignorance. So one who is following this process strictly, these yogic asanas, and his breathing is also under control, then what happens? Then he becomes immune to the contamination of the modes of nature, which is goodness, passion, and ignorance. So he is basically, from the external world, he is now turning inwards. So he is stopping the external things by following all these asanas and pranayama and all these things, and now he is focusing on internal, towards the Paramatma which is sitting in the heart. Yogic process. The preliminary activities of the ways of yoga are asanas, pranayam, pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, etc. Maharaj Dhrtarastra was to attain success in those preliminary actions because he was seated in a sanctified place and was concentrating upon one objective, namely the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari. Thus all his senses were being engaged in the service of the Lord. So Prabhupada nicely puts over here that because he's sitting in one position, in one place, and the place is sanctified, purified, so, and he is concentrating upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, what is happening is his senses are being engaged in the service of the Lord. Though he is sitting in one place, but because his mind is focused on the Lord, that means his senses are engaged in the service of the Lord. So, how this process helps? This process directly helps the devotee to get freedom from the contaminations of the three modes of material nature. So this yogic process actually helps us to get out or fight against the contaminations of the three modes of nature. It makes the person gunatita. Guna means three modes. Gunatita means they gradually go beyond the modes. Even the highest mode, the material modes of goodness, right? The modes of goodness is also the cause of material bondage. What to speak of the other qualities, namely passion and ignorance. Right? So goodness also causes bondage. Goodness, actually, in Bhagavad Gita also Krishna explains that people are bound by these three modes. Some are bound in the mode of goodness, some are bound in the mode of passion, and some are bound in the mode of ignorance. Passion and ignorance increases the material propensity of hankering for material enjoyment, and the strong sense of lust provokes the accumulation of wealth and power. So these are the symptoms of the mode of passion and ignorance. That is hankering for material enjoyment. We want more and more enjoyment. Also, there's a lust which is there in the heart. It becomes stronger. There's a stronger sense of lust. And So lust over here, it means desire to accumulate more things. Yeah, kama. So that kama actually provokes us to accumulate more wealth and power. Because if we have more wealth and power, then what will happen is there is three tendencies which we discussed earlier: controller, proprietor, and enjoyer. So if we want to enjoy, then we want to become proprietor, we want to be owner. Right? When we are owning something, then we can enjoy that. When we own something, then we can control that and we can enjoy that. So how can we own something? So for that we need wealth and power. So the mode of passion actually drives us, passion and ignorance, they drive us to accumulate more wealth and power. So the physical form of it is wealth and all this thing, and subtle form of it is the power. Right? So then people start playing various tricks to protect their power, because they want to stay in the power. So if they are in power, then they can actually enjoy things, isn't it? So in order to enjoy, you have to be having the power. You want to be a controller. So these are very, very subtle and very important lines put by Srila Prabhupada, and it requires deep thought and introspection. We also have these things. We want to have wealth as well as we want to have power. We want to have status in the society. So even though we may be studying Srimad Bhagavatam, but these desires are there. So this Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the purports of the acharyas actually helps us to identify this deep, issues which are sitting in our heart. So it requires deep introspection, and we sometimes externally behave like that, but then once it is done, we need to introspect and see, am I doing a thing in order to gain power, or am I doing a thing to please Krishna? So the simplest way is to practice this principle is whenever we are doing any service, then before doing the service, we ask this question internally in our mind: is it there? Am I doing the service? Am I doing any activity? Is it to please Krishna, or is it for my gain? Is it kama or is it prema? Now these questions won't come very naturally, but we have to force our mind to ask this question, and then we will have an answer, whether yes, I'm doing it for getting my benefit, or improving my position. So then we need to work toward it. So anyway, these are some thoughts which I had. So everybody has to do this exercise themselves, because nobody can do this exercise for each other. And by practice, man becomes perfect, isn't it? So for us, this practice is required. We have to very deliberately practice this, that any action which you do, is it to please Krishna or is it for some material gain? If it is to please Krishna, if it is for some material gain, then we need to have a plan to dovetail that to please Krishna. Okay, and if it is for pleasing Krishna, then it's excellent, but if not, then if we have the desire, we cannot be self-deceptive. If we are self-deceptive, then we are cheating ourselves, and we are not heading it or making progress in Krishna consciousness. Right? So these are some thoughts, and this can be easily done because by the blessing of some devotee. So therefore, selfless service to devotee is very important. When we serve our spiritual masters, then or some very qualified Vaishnava, by their blessing, these things becomes very easy. So our heart get purified, gradually. So Prabhupada first talks about how this process helps. Right? So this process helps to overcome the contaminations of the three modes of nature. The next Prabhupada is saying how this process does not help. One who has conquered these two baseline mentalities, that he has raised himself to the platform of goodness, which is full of knowledge and morality, cannot also control the senses, namely the eyes, the tongue, the nose, the ears, and the touch. So this process does not help in conquering the senses. Right? So it may be helping us to become morally good, or maybe bringing us to the platform of goodness, but it does not help to control the senses. So therefore, what processes helps to control both of them? That is described by Prabhupada in the next paragraph, which is Bhakti Yoga is the best of all the processes. But one who surrenders himself unto the lotus feet of the Lord Hari, as above mentioned, can transcend all influences of the modes of material nature and be fixed in the service of the Lord. So when we surrender ourselves to the lotus feet of Lord Hari, then it is possible. So that is the verse, that is verse BG 14.27. No, so I think 14.26. Or 28. I don't know what happened. F2 BG 14.
What is the software, Prabhu?
Oh, this one? This one is the Vedabase. 27. No, I'm looking for the next verse. Or the previous verse. Yeah. Nam choyo vicharena bhakti yogana saguna samitadyetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So, this is what is needed for us actually. We need to engage in the process of bhakti, and when we engage in the process of bhakti, one can transcend all influence of the modes of material nature and can be fixed in the service of the Lord at once. Mam cha vyo vabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitayetan brahma bhuyayat. This is 14.26. So we immediately come to the platform of Brahman. The Bhakti Yoga plus our senses are engaged in the service of the Lord. So senses are automatically controlled. The Bhakti Yoga process therefore directly applies the senses to the loving service of the Lord. This prohibits the performer from engaging in material activities. So anything which we are doing for the Lord, whether it is deity service, whether it is cleaning the temple, whether it is pot washing, it is all the performer is engaging in. It's not any material activity, it's actually a spiritual activity. So it is our consciousness which decides what kind of activity or what kind of results it turns into. The process of turning the senses from material attachment to the loving transcendental service of the Lord is called as pratyahara. So this is also this is a pratyahara stage for us. The process of turning the senses from material attachment, doing the services in the mood of satisfying ourselves, because normally whenever we do any activity, the center is us. So for us, pratyahara means the same service is the same activity we are going to continue to do, but we are going to do it for Krishna. So that is a pratyahara stage for us. And the very process is called as pranayama. Ultimately, the ending in samadhi or absorption in pleasing the Supreme Lord Hari by all means. Right? So that is a samadhi for us. We are doing completely absorbed in doing the service and completely absorbed in doing the service to please Krishna. Pleasing the absorption in pleasing the Supreme Lord Hari by all means. So this is a matter of practice, because of millions of lifetime of practice other way, it is very difficult to focus on this. But we have to start absorbing ourselves in pleasing Krishna, the Supreme Lord Hari by all means. So Prabhupada uses this word, somehow or other. By all means somehow or other focus. Somehow or other think about pleasing the Lord by our action. Samsiddhi harito sanam. So any action, then the consciousness behind that action should be to please the Lord. Otherwise it is shram eva hi kevalam. Yes, just it's totally waste of time, right? Vignanam atmani samyojna kshetragna pravilapyatam brahmani atmanam adare gatam brahme ivambare. So I forgot to look at this is verse number 55. So in 53 and 54 purport, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has, let's read at it, 53 and 54. He's in the commentary saying that the process of Ashtanga Yoga, is the size. Okay. The process of Ashtanga Yoga that he performed is described in 4 verses. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying that these 4 verses, the process of Ashtanga Yoga is described. The niyamas are, so yamas and niyamas, these are the initial things, right? The first 2 of the Ashtanga Yoga, first stage is yama, second stage is niyama. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the niyamas are bathing, sacrifice and taking water as food. Niyamas are bathing, sacrifice and taking water as food. The yamas are calming the mind. Upasanatma, and destroying attachments, which is vigatai snaha, and asana in pranayam and pratyahara are described in the 3rd line. Dharana and dhyana are described in the last line. So this previous verse in the 3rd line and in the last line, these descriptions are given. So what I can do is I can give a copy of this to all of you if you want to do a reference. I can share that copy with you. Alright, so let's go back to the report here. Okay, we read this. This is verse number 55. Dhrtarastra will have to amalgamate his pure identity with intelligence and then merge into Supreme Being with knowledge of his qualitative oneness as living entity with the Supreme Brahman. Being freed from the blocked sky, he will have to rise to the spiritual sky. So let's understand what Srila Prabhupada is saying. First of all, Prabhupada is talking about that the process of fall down. The living entity being living being, by his desiring to lord it over the material world and declining to cooperate with the Supreme Lord, contacts the sum total of the material world, namely the Mahat Tattva, and from the Mahat Tattva his false identity with the material world, intelligence, mind and senses are developed. This covers his pure spiritual identity. So when the living entity comes into this material world from the spiritual world, then different coverings are given. So if we see the layers of the universe, so there is one layer of the universe as Mahat Tattva, and then there are other layers in like mind, intelligence, and all this false ego. So these are the layers or the coverings which is given to the living entities. Now why these coverings are given? Because originally the living entity is pure in spiritual consciousness, right? But the living entity wants desires to enjoy separate from Krishna. But if that covering is not given, then he cannot enjoy fully. So therefore this layer is given, and these are the two different Shaktis of the Lord, Prakshektratmika and Avaratmika. By these two Shaktis, the living entity is actually covered, and the covering is the purpose of the covering is to cover his pure spiritual identity. This covers his pure spiritual identity. So he forgets that I am soul. I am soul, I am part and parcel of Krishna. He forgets all these things. It's like amnesia, right? And it is very scary. Sometimes, let's say, something happens and we forget everything. It's like a very scary event actually, because we don't know where we are, who we are, and who are our people around us. So there's a lot of anxiety. So similarly, when the living entity who is actually pure spiritual identity, he forgets everything when he comes to the material world, and that forgetfulness is given by the Lord himself so that he can enjoy. Reverting this fall down by yogic process, when the pure identity is realized in self-realization, one has to revert the original position by amalgamating the five gross elements and the subtle elements, subtle elements, mind and intelligence, into Mahat Tattva again. So when we want to go back, so these are different layers, and if I can find the picture of the layers, I can maybe you can understand what I'm talking about. So introduction. I think I might have pictures over here. Yeah, so I'll try to expand this and you might be able to see. So these are the coverings of the universe. Now it is not very clear, but if you can see, these are the layers: the false ego, intelligence, mind, ether, air, fire, water, and earth. So these are subtle elements. These are not, so earth means it's not gross, it's subtle. Okay, subtle earth. Like there is subtle water. Water in a gross form is the water which we see, and the subtle form of water is the cloud. So cloud is also water. We can experience that cloud is water when the rain falls, isn't it? So that is subtle form of the water. So similarly, there is a subtle form of earth, and there are certain yojanas. The description is given, and then the 10th time is more. So let's say this is 100 miles. So this is water layer is 1000 miles. It's 10 times greater than the previous one. And then this is 1000, then this will be 10,000. It's 10,000, then this will be 100,000. So like that, it keeps on increasing. So when the living entity comes into the material world from the spiritual world, so assuming, so let me see if I have a other bigger picture, so we can see that. Okay, doesn't look like I have one. Anyway, we can just continue with the same picture. So it comes from the spiritual world, which is depicted in above this. This is just a zoom into one universe, but the spiritual world is above this, so somewhere above this. So when the living entity comes into this world, let's say it's entering from here, so then all these coverings are given and it is placed in one of the 14 planetary system. So this is Brahma Loka, the top one is Brahma Loka, and then or Satya Loka, and then Tapa Loka, Jana Loka, Mahar Loka, Swarga Loka. So right now we are in this earthly planet, Bhuloka. So in one of these planets, our position is based on the previous karma we are given. We have been placed in one of this realm. Now when we want to get out, then the exit strategy, the door through which we came, the same door we have to exit. So we have to exit, let's say we are coming from here, then you have to exit from here. So while coming in, all these layers are given. Now while going back, we have to, whatever layers which we have to shed those layers. So you have to give up the earth layer, then the water layer, then the fire layer, air. So all these layers has to be given up, and then from the other side the pure living entity will come out. This is the process. So that's what Prabhupada is saying. By the yogic process, when his pure identity is realized in self-realization, one has to revert the original position by amalgamating the 5 gross elements. So these are the 5 gross elements, right? Earth, water, fire, air and ether. He has to give up all these 5 gross elements. 5 gross elements and the subtle element of mind and intelligence into the Mahat Tattva again. So Mahat Tattva is the total energy, the total substance. Thus, getting freed from the clutches of the Mahat Tattva, he has to merge in the existence of the Supreme Soul. In other words, he has to realize that qualitatively he is non-different from the Super Soul, and thus he transcends the material sky by his pure identical intelligence and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So after exiting, then there are different options based on the desire which we have. So one of the option is to merge in the Brahman, other option is to go back to the spiritual world and engage in service of the Lord. This is the highest perfectional development of a spiritual identity, which is attained by Dhrtarastra by the grace of Vidura and the Lord. So, by grace of Vidura and by grace of Lord, and later on we will see that in one of the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying that towards the end, that he is not getting the highest benefit, though it is it's said over here that it is the highest perfectional development of spiritual identity. So when you regain your state, you can be either in the Brahman, where you are in a pure spiritual form, but Dhrtarastra did not attain the service of the Lord because Vidura didn't give him. So that has been revealed later on. The highest perfectional development of spirituality, which is attained by Dhrtarastra by the grace of Vidura and the Lord. The Lord's mercy was bestowed upon him by his personal contact with Vidura. So Vidura became the instrument. And when he was actually practicing the instructions of Vidura, the Lord helped him to attain the highest perfectional stage. So when he was following his Guru, which is Vidura, then the Lord helped him. So this is what we also learn, that when we follow our instruction of our spiritual master, the Lord helps us. So here is a live example where Lord Krishna is helping Dhrtarastra. What is the position of pure devotee? Prabhupada explains, a pure devotee of the Lord does not live on any planet of the material sky, nor does he feel any contact with the material elements. His so-called material body does not exist, being surcharged with the spiritual current of the Lord's identical interest. And thus he is permanently freed from all contaminations of the sum total of Mahat Tattva. He is always in the spiritual sky, which he attains by being transcendental to the sevenfold material covering by the effect of his devotional service. So though the devotee is within the material world, he is not affected by the modes of nature. He is transcendental to them. The conditioned souls are within the covering, whereas the liberated souls is far beyond the cover. So that is the difference between us and the liberated soul. So the liberated soul are, though they are in this world, but they are not affected by the modes, because ultimately these layers are nothing but the modes under which the living entity is living in this world. It's covered by these modes, different degree of different things. It's a combination of all these things. But because a devotee, pure devotee's interest is same as Lord, then he is not affected by that. Though he is there in this world, but he is not affected by that. Right? Verse number 56. Okay. ध्वास्ता माया गुणाद्रको निरुद्ध कारण आशयः निवर्तित अखिलाहार अस्तेस्तानूर इवाचलः तस्यांत रयो मयवाभुः संन्यस्ताखिलकर मनः. So then he is going to describe what is going to happen next, which is he will have to suspend. Now see the statements, means this has not happened. This is what is going to happen in the future. Right? Therefore, Narad Muni is saying he will have to suspend all the actions of the senses, even from outside. So he has to suspend the actions of his senses from outside, and will have to be impervious to interactions of the senses. The senses cannot act at that point of time, which are influenced by the modes of material nature. So generally this, if our consciousness is in matter, right, our senses are influenced by the modes of nature. After renouncing all material duties, he must become immovably established beyond all source of hindrance on the path. So then he is gradually moving towards samadhi. That's what it means. So here is a nice picture of Dhrtarastra. Yeah, he is meditating on the Lord in the heart. And beyond him, in the back side of him, we can see it's a nice sanctified place, and Mother Ganges is flowing nearby, as well as the Himalayas on the back side. So Prabhupada talks about the term Nirguna, because this word Nirguna is used in the in this verse. Where is that? Okay, don't see it. Okay. Anyway, coming back to the purport. Dhritarashtra had attained by yogic process the stage of negation of all sorts of material reactions. The effect of the material modes of nature draws the victim to indefectible desires of enjoying matter, but one can escape such false enjoyment by yogic process. So by the process of yoga, you can detach yourself, you can the mind can be controlled, and the desire over enjoying the material nature gradually diminishes. Every sense is always busy in searching for its food. Right? So eyes is looking for different kind of food, stomach is looking for different kind of food, and our senses are looking for food. Food is a source of enjoyment, and thus the conditioned soul is assaulted from all sides and has no chance to become steady in any pursuit. Yeah, because the senses are so strong, right? And therefore in second chapter also Krishna says that when the senses are strong, you have to withdraw the senses. But even for the yogi who is trying to practice, it is very difficult. Maharaj Yudhishthira was advised by Narada not to disturb his uncle by attempting to bring him back home. So the idea why Narad Muni is telling all these things is that your uncle is on the right path, so do not disturb him, not bring him, trying to bring him back, because the Yudhishthir's point was that he must be in trouble, so he wants to help him out. But in this case the help was not good, even though his desire to help is good, but that help will actually, the help provided by Maharaj Yudhishthir will actually not help Maharaj Dhrtarastra to achieve the ultimate purpose of life. So therefore Maharaj Yudhishthira was advised by Narada not to disturb his uncle by attempting to bring him back home. He was now beyond the attraction of anything material. The material modes of nature, the gunas, have their different modes of activity, but above the material modes of nature is the spiritual mode, which is absolute. Nirguna. So the nirguna means without reaction. Guna means modes. Nirguna means above the modes. The spiritual modes and its effects are identical. Therefore, the spiritual qualities is distinguished from the material counterpart by the word nirguna. After complete suspension of the material modes of nature, one is admitted to the spiritual sphere, and actions dictated by the spiritual mode is called devotional service or bhakti. So going beyond the modes or nirguna, the bhakti automatically takes us there, right? But what bhakti? The pure bhakti, not the mishra bhakti. Mishra bhakti means mixed bhakti. So if we have mixed bhakti, that is the beginning stage, but gradually we have to strive for pure bhakti. Anya abhilashita sunya. Right? That's a definition of bhakti. Anya abhilashita sunya jnana karmadi anavrita anukulyena krishnaanusilanam bhakti uttama. So that is the abhilashita. EBH Vilasita. This Bhakti Rasamrit 111. That is Anya Abhilasita Sunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam Anukulyena Krishna Anusilanam Bhakti Uttama. This is the definition of Uttama Bhakti. Means all the other abhilasha or desire. Sunya means we have to make it as zero. Right? And so this is the definition of, actually one of the definition of bhakti. So after suspension of the material modes of nature, one is admitted to the spiritual sphere, and the action dictated by the spiritual mode is called devotional service or bhakti. Bhakti is therefore nirguna, attained by direct contact with the absolute. So this contact with the absolute happens when there is a desire to make a contact with absolute, right? Or to serve the absolute. So therefore, we saw that the pure devotees, as defined earlier, not in this purport, but in the previous purport, we saw that the pure devotee his desire is in line of the desire of the Supreme Lord. His desire is same as the Supreme Lord. So therefore, he comes in contact with the Lord. He's anya abhilashita sunya. He doesn't have any other abhilasha. It's all sunya. So let's see what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has to say in this purport. So here towards the end of the purport, which is given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that it is well known that the Paramatma and Bhagavan are one. So vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam avyayam brahmeti paramatmeti Bhagwan iti sabdate. So this is given in Bhagavatam, that this three forms, that is Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagwan, they are actually non-dual, they are one. Therefore Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur over here he writes that. But it is well known that Paramatma and Bhagwan are one. That is true. But though they are one, there is a functional difference. Right? So though Bhagwan and Paramatma, they are one, there is a functional difference. This is explained through an example. It is like an air in a pot and the air outside, like the limited sky and the unlimited sky. So if there is a pot and the pot is empty, there is air inside the pot, and air is outside the pot. Both are air actually, right? It is like air in the pot and air outside the pot, like the unlimited sky and the limited sky. The sky in the pot and the sky outside the pot are actually one, since the sky are all pervading. They are like one. The lack of deviation is described. Deviation arises from internal disturbance of the gunas or from external agitations of the so this is another point. Is talking about that the lack of deviation is described. Deviation arises from internal disturbance of the gunas or the external agitations of the senses. Dhrtarastra is neither, because he has destroyed the result of the gunas and of Maya, the impression of desires. Therefore, he has controlled the senses and mind. So, he's trying to explain that Dhrtarastra has gone beyond the guna and Maya. He has destroyed that. Okay, coming back to the discussion, verse number 57. Sava adya tanadurajan paranta panchame ahani kalevaram hasyati swayam takcha bhashami bhavishyati. O king, he will quit his body most probably on the 5th day from today, and his body will turn into ashes. So he's talking about Dhrtarastra. So when you have yogic power, there is a point where you can burn yourself through this yogic shaktis. So that's what this is the way he is going to leave his body. Is the fire, with his internal fire within the body, he can produce fire from within, and that will burn his body, like Sati did it, right? In case of the pastimes of Lord Shiva and Daksha, Sati, she burned herself with the yogic power. So similarly, Dhrtarashtra should be able to do it from the 5th day, from today. That's what it's saying. So Prabhupada explained the yogic way of living body. Narad Muni's prophecy prohibited Yudhishthira Maharaj from going to the place where his uncle was staying, because even after quitting the body by his own mystic power, Dhrtarashtra would not be in need of any funeral ceremony. So Narad Muni nicely puts this point, and it is said, because within that he is going to burn his own body. So then this funeral ceremony did not be done. So even if Maharaj Yudhishthira goes there, he will find nothing. Right? So that's what he's saying. The Dhrtarashtra would not be in need of any funeral ceremony. Narad Muni indicated that his body by itself would burn to ashes. The perfection of the yoga system is attained by such mystic power. So the mystic yogis can attain this perfection. Basically, they are having control over death. So they are having control over their destiny. The yogi is able to quit his body by his own choice of time and can attain any planet he desires by turning the present body into ashes by self-made fire. So this is advanced yogis can do this. So here we see by in the picture nicely painted by some devotee, that he should be able to burn his body by his yogic power, and then whenever he is ready, and that's what Mahatma Muni is saying, that within 5 days he will be able to do so. Verse number 58. So Dhyamane agnir dehe patyu patni saho taje bahi stita patim swadvi tam agnim anu vikshate. While outside observing her husband, who will burn in the fire of mystic power along with his thatched cottage, his wife, chaste wife, will enter the fire with rapt attention. So he's talking about now Gandhari, who is going to actually enter the fire. So this is the picture which depicts that Gandhari, once Dhrtarastra sets fire to himself, Gandhari is actually also going to enter inside and give up her life. So, and this is Vidura actually watching this. Mother Gandhari leaving her body. Gandhari was an ideal chaste lady, a life companion of her husband, and therefore when she saw her husband burning in the fire of mystic yoga along with his cottage of leaves, she despaired. She left home after losing her 100 sons, and in the forest she saw that her most beloved husband was also burning. Now she actually felt alone, and therefore she entered the fire of her husband and followed her husband to death. This entering of a chaste lady into the fire of her dead husband is called as sati rites, and the action is considered to be most perfect for a woman. Now this is not for current women, okay? This is for that previous age. In the later age, this sati rite became an obnoxious criminal affair. So here Prabhupada is explaining what is this was actually very considered as very pious things, right? But it is on the will of the women. It is not that somebody can force that women to do sati, right? In the later age, means later on, this sati rite became an obnoxious criminal affair because the ceremony was forced upon even an unwilling women. So some women, they want to do sati, but some women they don't want. So this forcing was not the culture. The Vedic culture was not like that. In this fallen age, it is not possible for any lady to follow the sati rites as chastely it's done by Gandhari and other in the past ages. A chaste wife like Gandhari would feel the separation of her husband to be more burning than actual fire. So therefore she can do this, and that is by her own will. Such a lady can observe the sati rites voluntarily, and there is no criminal force by anyone. When the rite became a formality only and force was applied upon lady to follow the principle, actually it became a criminal, and therefore the ceremony was stopped by the state laws. So this is the correct thing to do. When it is forcing somebody, you cannot forcefully kill anybody. This prophecy of Narada to Maharaj Yudhishthira forbade him to go to his widowed aunt. So earlier in the previous verse he is talking about his uncle, and now in this verse he is talking about his aunt, that she is also going to enter into the fire. Verse number 59. Vidurastu tad ascharyam nishamya kurunandana harsha soka yutas tasmad ghanta tirtha nisevakaha. Vidura, being affected with delight and grief, will then leave the place of sacred pilgrimage. So after that place, where Dhrtarastra and Gandhari, they went there, and they performed their yogic practices, and they are going to leave the body from that place, and then that place became the place. Became a place of pilgrimage. It became sacred. So therefore here it is saying, then they will leave the place of sacred pilgrimage. So he was Vidura, we see over here, he was delightful, he was very happy, as well as he was painful in his heart. Why? Because he is not going to have any association of his brother anymore. So that was painful to his heart. Whereas why he was delightful? Because his brother, he was able to successfully help his brother to attain the goal of his life, ultimate goal of the life. So Vidura leaves for pilgrimage. Vidura was astonished to see the marvelous departure of his brother. This is considered as very marvelous, this departure. Dhrtarastra, as a liberated yogi, for in his past life he was much attached to materialism. So though he did a lot of atrocities, but by the mercy of a devotee, by the association of a devotee, he was able to attain the ultimate goal of life. So that was his departure is considered as marvelous. So that is the effect of associating with devotees. So in Bhagavatam it is said like Ante Narayana Smriti. If that doesn't happen, then our life is not successful. If we cannot remember Lord Krishna at the end of the life, then whatever we have done, it was Shram Eva Hi Kevalam. Of course, it's not totally loss. We can continue with whatever we have gained, but the ultimate goal of everyone should have is Ante Narayana Smriti, or Ante means for us Krishna Smriti. You should be able to remember Krishna at the time of death, right? So there's a series of verses in the 8th chapter which is talking about how to leave the body, right? So basically, let's read those verses, and we should always remember this. These verses are verse number 5. This chapter is talking about attaining the supreme, and Krishna talks about, and whoever at the end of the life quits his body remembering me alone at once attain my nature. Krishna's nature means Krishna is transcendental. So if we can remember Krishna at the time of leaving the body, Ante Narayana Smriti, then we will attain Krishna's nature. Krishna is saying, of this there is no doubt. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. This is Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kaleranam ya prayati samad bhavam yati nasti atra asamsaya. So if we can remember Krishna at the time of death, we attain Krishna's nature. The next verse, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits the body. So whatever state, if, like Maharaj Bharat was thinking about deer, so he got a body of a deer. Right? Somebody thinks about dog, then they get a body of dog. That's why it is not advisable to keep a pet, because we get so attached to the pet that if something happens, then we remember the pet at the time of death. It's very difficult to give up those kind of attachment. So whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante karevaram tam tame vaiti kvanteya sada tad bhava bhavita. This is 8.6. Therefore, the most important verse, which I repeat many times. Therefore, Krishna is giving these two things, that whatever we are thinking at the time of death, we will get that kind of body, right? So therefore, Krishna's advice to Arjuna is, therefore, Arjuna, tasmat sarveshu kaleshu, therefore all the time, mam anusmara yuddhacha. Krishna is saying, therefore Arjuna, you should always think of me. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. Always think of me. In form of Krishna. Prabhupada adds this because Krishna is saying, mam anusmara yuddhacha. So first, is Mam Anuswara. And then second is Yuddhacha. So first remember Krishna and then continue with the fight. So he's not saying give up fighting. He's saying remember me and fight. Same thing for us, applicable to us. Remember Krishna and do our activities. So one way of remembering is by the process of chanting. Right? In the morning we get up and we chant our rounds. So that is helping us to build our consciousness throughout the day. So Mam Anusmara Yuddhacha. And then Krishna is saying Maya Arpita Mano Buddhir. Means dedicate your mind and intelligence to me. Fix your mind and intelligence to me. And then what will happen? Mame Vaishyasi. Means you will come to me. Asamshaya. There is no doubt. Mam e Vaishyasi Asamshaya. Maya Arpita Mano Buddhir. Mam e Vaishyasi Asamshaya. Means you are going to attain me. Asamshaya means do not have any doubt. So these are, when Krishna says we do not have any doubt, we should not have doubt. Of course, it is only due to Vidura that his brother attained the desirable goal of life. Vidura was therefore glad to learn about it. But he was sorry that he could not make his brother turn into a pure devotee. That was his, he was lamenting for that. This was not done by Vidura because Dhrtarastra, being inimical to the Pandavas, who were all devotees of the Lord. Right? So this he was envious of the devotees, right, of the Lord. Therefore, he didn't get the ultimate goal. So this is a very important lesson for all of us. We do not create any enmity among the devotee community, because that will not allow us to attain our goal. So we have to fight our battles, right? We have to choose our battles basically. So if you want to go back, we should not have any enemies. An offense at the feet of Vaishnava is more dangerous than the offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. Vidura was certainly very liberal to bestow mercy upon his brother Dhrtarastra, whose past life was very materialistic. But ultimately the result of such mercy certainly depended on the will of the Supreme Lord in the present life. Therefore Dhrtarastra attained liberation only, and after many such liberated state of life, one can attain the stage of devotional service. So he didn't get the pure bhakti. Vidura was certainly very mortified by the death of his brother and his sister-in-law, and only remedy to mitigate, so is Vidura leaving, such lamentation was to go out to pilgrimage. So therefore Vidura leaves for pilgrimage. Thus Maharaj Yudhishthira had no chance to call back Vidura, his surviving uncle. So he was lamenting, he was happy as well as he was lamenting. And Prabhupada says, so the best way to come out of such kind of lamentation is to go for pilgrimage. So then, after they both are burned to ashes, then Vidura leaves for pilgrimage. Last verse. Iti uptva ataruhat swargam narada satamburu yudhishthiro vachastasya Yadi kritva ajahat sucha. So before going to the 60th verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, I have marked something here, so there should be something. Yeah, so Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the 59th verse, he is saying, it should be understood that Dhritarashtra, being an offender to the devotees, attained only liberation, not prema, since Vidura did not give such mercy. Right. So this is also we saw in the purport. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada has taken this point. So let's go back to verse number 60. Translation. Having spoken thus, the great sage Narada, along with his Veena, ascended into the outer space. Yudhishthira kept his instruction in his heart, so was able to get rid of all lamentations. So when he heard from Narada Muni, and he was able to retain these instructions, right? He was able to retain this instruction, and he could get himself rid of all the lamentations which was there in his heart. So here we see Narad Muni is going towards the Swargaloka. Narad Muni leaves after instructing Maharaj Yudhishthira. Sri Narad Ji is an eternal spaceman, or sometimes Prabhupada says transcendental spaceman, having been endowed with the spiritual body by the grace of the Lord. He doesn't need anything to travel. He can travel in the outer space of both the material and the spiritual worlds without restriction, and can approach any planet in unlimited space within no time. He can go anywhere, anytime. It doesn't need time to go from one place to another. We have already discussed his previous life, right? We have discussed this in, I think, chapter number 5, 4, 5, 6, right? He was there. Narada's pastimes are discussed. As the son of maid servant, because of his association with pure devotees, he was elevated to the position of eternal spaceman. Eternal spaceman, and thus had freedom of movement. One should therefore try to follow in the footsteps of Narad Muni and not make a futile effort to reach other planets by mechanical means. Right? Prabhupada uses these terms, Sputnik and all these things. Maharaj Yudhishthira was pious king, and therefore he could see Narad Muni occasionally. Anyone who desires to see Narad Muni must first be pious and follow the footsteps of Narad Muni. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the first canto, 13th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Dhrtarastra Quits Home. Shri Narad Muni ki jai. Okay, let's go to see if there is anything. Yeah. So yeah, Narad Muni actually ascended to Swargaloka. This is given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Any discussion? Any thoughts? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question on verse 55. So there was mention of 7-fold material coverings. So I was wondering, how come 7? Like 5 Panchamahabhutas and what else? But
Yeah,
either it is 8, 7, 8 or 5, right? It was mentioned in the verse as 7 coverings.
So it could be a different classification. Sometimes verse number
55 at the end.
Sorry, 55.
Yeah, third line from bottom.
He is always in the spiritual sky, which is attained by the transcendental, being transcendental to the 7-fold material coverings by the effect of devotional service. So,
I think it is 5.
5 plus 3, normally it is 8. So, depending on, there are a lot of times the groupings are done, based on the context in which they are speaking. So, I'm trying to understand the context, and I'm not able to, because I thought it is he is always in the spiritual sky, which he is attains by being in the transcendental to the self. The effect of devotional service. I'll have to research, Prabhu. I'm not sure what the 7-fold means.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine, Prabhu. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. My understanding is this 8-fold coverings. So this is 5, and then this is mind, intelligence, and false ego.
False.
Actually, there is in other places there is some other coverings are also given, and I'm not
Consciousness.
Consciousness,
Covered.
yeah. So maybe that's the covering he is talking about. And this diagram is also not a very correct diagram, actually. Because here it shows, we cannot see in this picture, but here there's a tortoise which is shown. The tortoise is actually not here. It is outside the universe, all the universes.
So Prabhu, if you see the new diagram, Prabhu,
okay, yeah, that's what I was trying to look for. I
yeah,
didn't.
let me show you, Prabhu. Let me show you the new diagram.
Okay, why don't you share your screen?
Yeah, I'm just turning on my screen. Yeah, you see this, Prabhu?
Yeah. Here there are
you
7.
Yeah, there are only 7. The Panch Mahabhuta, false ego, and the Mahatattva.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the one. Yes. So this diagram is more correct compared to the one which I was showing earlier.
Yeah.
So if you zoom out, Prabhu, can you zoom out?
Is it? Shall I go closer, Prabhu?
No, far.
Far. Okay. Okay. Let me see. Okay.
Okay. So maybe go to the right side where there is a tortoise shown.
There is where tortoise, Prabhu?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Here is. Shall I go back?
Yeah. So you see the tortoise is over here. It is not outside the universe. Whereas in that other diagram, the tortoise is shown outside the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, good to know.
Yeah,
I
so
don't
that
know.
diagram has that was the initial very old diagram. I think that has some issues. So, but this is the correct one. So as Vrajanavan Prabhu is showing, right, there are 7 layers. So this is the 7 layers.
And
Yes.
also, Prabhu, if you see the 7 layer, Prabhu, so the mind and intelligence is not there because are they part of our subtle body? That's why, Prabhu.
That is part of the subtle body. So I think again these classifications, depending on the context, the classifications changes. So somewhere you will find 5 gross elements. Sometimes you will find some of the gross elements are combined. So based on the context and what the author is trying to speak, what devotee is trying to speak, then they will give that kind of explanation, or they'll do that kind of grouping. Like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that 6 senses, right? Manasashrani Indriyani.
Yeah, we consider mind also.
Yeah. So Krishna is considering mind as one of the senses. Right? Otherwise, normally there are 5 senses.
Yeah, that's true.
So depending on what there are the elements. Normally the elements has this kind of confusion. There are sometimes you'll see 24 elements, okay, of the creation. Then somewhere you'll see 25 elements. Then sometimes you'll see Bhagavata classification is 26 elements.
26 also.
So depending on the different groups of devotees, they do the different kind of classifications. All right, thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah,
So at least it's clear now that 7 are there in that diagram. Thank you, Vajravan Prabhu, for sharing that. Okay, so we'll stop here. Any other discussion? No? If yes, no? Okay. So
I just not maybe there is not much discussion about Dhritarashtra's previous life. I'm not sure whether Prabhupada explicitly mentioned about that in any purport, or we normally know because of laws of karma that he had to suffer, in the previous life he had killed some birds, right? Birds, baby birds. But it is not much emphasized or discussed much, right, in any other purport. Why it's suffering?
No, I didn't find any more description than this. Because here the emphasis is on the purification. I mean, here mostly the emphasis is on how the association of devotee is important. Like two kind of association is explained over here. One is Vidura association, giving association to Dhrtarastra. The second one is Narad Muni coming and he is giving knowledge to Maharaj Yudhishthira. So this is the focus of this chapter. That's what my understanding is. That how devotee association can uplift the consciousness of a person, even if that person is at the level of Dhrtarastra. And secondly, how devotees are merciful. There is no need for Vidura to come here, but he took that effort. As soon as Canto 4, we'll see when we go to Canto 4, as soon as Canto 4 ends, he decided, okay, now let me go and save my brother. So that's what is discussed in this chapter.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you, bro.
Thank you,
bro.
All right, so we'll stop here. He Narad Muni ki jai. Yudhishthir Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Maharaj Dhrtarastra ki jai. Gandhari ji ki jai. Gaur Premanande Haribo. Haribo.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.